Good afternoon, church family. This is your pastor, Nathan Van Horn, and welcome to day 57 of F260 at First Baptist Meridian. I just want to say thank you for your understanding. The past several days, I know our postings have been later in the day in the afternoon. We've had some additional administrative things to take care of the past several days, so hopefully today is the last day for a late posting, and tomorrow we can resume posting first thing in the morning, so that you can do your devotional Bible reading and video with a cup of coffee, as my wife likes to do. That being said, today we look at Deuteronomy 30 and 31, and I got to be honest, I love to talk about the literature, the theology, the big picture in light of the passage, and we'll deal with some of that, but devotionally, this passage kind of hit me differently today, just rereading it. This is Moses addressing the people going into a land that he's not allowed to go into. He's addressing a generation of people that he's about to be separated from. Because going back to when he struck the rock instead of speaking to it, Moses, who leads the people out of Egypt, is the last representative of that generation that does not get to go into the promised land. And right now, church, that's how it feels as the church. Most churches increasingly are making the decision, at least for the immediate future, not to gather in person. And it feels like exile, not being able to worship alongside each other, to gather for fellowship. That means so much to me as a pastor. And I know so much, even, when we issued strong cautions this past week, we had people coming to worship in their 80s and even in their 90s because they love the Lord and they love to worship Him with His people. I think a lot of times when we read the Bible, we can lose the emotional impact on the characters that we're reading about. Imagine Moses' emotional state when he's saying these things to a people who will go into a land that he's not allowed to enter. He gets to look on the promised land from Mount Nebo, but Deuteronomy ends with his death. And what's so interesting is that today's reading divides essentially into two parts. Chapter 30 is a strong warning to the people about when they go into the land. He says, I'm setting before you blessing and curse, life or death. Choose life that you may live. In Deuteronomy, again and again, the most tangible proof that people love the Lord is that they obey His commands. The tangible proof that they trust God's character, which has been demonstrated again and again and again, is that they obey the content of what He reveals. And Moses tells the people, if you obey God's content, it will result in blessing for the people as a whole. But if you disregard the Lord, if you claim that you've done this in your own strength, if you live apart from His will for you as His kingdom of priests and His holy nations, you will have consequences. And the ultimate consequence that Moses goes into, just like we read in Leviticus 26, is being exiled from the land. And Moses speaks to that as someone who is, in a real sense, exiled from the land. Think about it. Moses had lived the middle section of his life. He was a Hebrew, but raised as an Egyptian. And then when he killed the Egyptian around age 40, what happened to Moses? He became a fugitive, and he lived the next 40 years of his life as an exile, outside and away from his people. And then in the final 40 years of his life, God uses him to lead the people out of Egypt into the cusp of His promised land. But in his final days, he returns in a real sense to being an exile. He shows them the land that he himself will not get to enter. And so, people debate all the time over what has changed, Old Covenant, New Covenant, what parts of the Old Testament still apply in the life of the believer. And, a 5 to 7 minute video is not really the place to parse that out in its entirety. I do know this. I am humbled, I am sobered by this reality. God doesn't care any less about His holiness than He ever has or He ever will. God does not care less about my obedience than He ever has or ever will. And God does not care less about His calling on my life or your life, if you've entrusted yourself to Him by grace through faith, than He ever has or ever will. So I pray that as the people of God, even and perhaps especially the people of God navigating some uncertainties in the days ahead of us as we see what shape the coronavirus continues to take in the States. I pray that we would be a people of faith, hope, and love. Absolutely. But I pray that we would also be a people of faithful, loving obedience, a people who trust the character of God enough to honor the content of what he has revealed to us. God bless you as you keep reading, reflecting, and responding to his word. And I'll see you tomorrow, hopefully on time. God bless.